Hey strangers, there's one thing we know for sure as business owners ourselves. The less your business spends, the more margin you keep. But today, everything costs more. So, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one proven platform, helping you reduce IT costs, maintenance costs, and manual errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move to NetSuite. Backed by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/strange. netsuite.com/strange.
Hey, true crime fans! Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free-true-crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free-true-crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Happy anniversary, strangers. Thanks for 4 wonderful and weird years. And now, here's one of your most requested topics and the anniversary episode chosen by our patrons. We hope that you enjoy it. I'm Laurah Norton, and this is One Strange Thing, the show where we search the nation's news archives for stories that can't quite be explained. We all remember that famous line from Star Wars, where Darth Vader reveals to Luke Skywalker his true parentage, right? It was uttered by the late, great James Earl Jones, who voiced Darth Vader. So, come on, say it with us. No, I am your father. Does that sound a little off to you? It should be, Luke, I am your father, right? Well, wrong. And if we're wrong, so are a lot of other people, including dozens of actors who've quoted that line over the years in parodies and in speeches and in cartoon remakes, in just about everything. But according to the script, as it was quoted by Snopes, the scene actually went like this. Vader, if you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. Skywalker, he told me enough. He told me you killed him. Vader, no, I am your father. Now, that does make sense, at least in the context of the scene. So, why have so many of us been saying, well, something else entirely? Strangers, we are pretty sure that you, as listeners of this particular show, have heard of the Mandela Effect. It's basically the widespread belief in something that just doesn't seem to be true. An event, a historical artifact, like an advertisement or a movie, even the details of a logo. Some call it a false memory. Others chalk it up to widespread misconceptions caused by errors in the media. Little things that just build up over time. But some think things are a little more complex than that. Or a lot more complex. Maybe even timeline-shifting, world-changingly complex. We'll get there. But first things first, we'll start with the origin of the term. According to CNN, quote, paranormal researcher Fiona Broome coined the term in 2009 after becoming convinced that then South African President Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 1980s. Now, apparently, many people had made that same assumption, and it wasn't just Mandela's not death. There were many other strange cultural moments that began to pop up. So Fiona Broome began to document these, glitches. In fact, she began an entire website devoted to that topic. And thus, the term Mandela Effect was born. The rise of social media has only increased discussion of these strange blips in our cultural consciousness, or as Forbes describes it, quote, collective memories that never happened. Except, of course, many of us, we aren't so sure of that last bit. Now, it must be said, the writer of this particular episode never thought that Nelson Mandela died back in the 1980s. This is probably due to having been alive in the 1980s and distinctly recalling when Mandela was finally freed, and when he became president of South Africa. So the name never really felt quite right on that front. But if it had been called the Berenstain Bear Effect, then we'd be cooking. Actually, let's start with that one, because that's also a Mandela effect that dates back decades. And this is one that did affect your humble narrator. In case you're unfamiliar, the Berenstain Bears is a children's book series that has also been adapted for the screen. Per the official website, the first book debuted in 1962. It was authored by Stan and Jan Berenstain, a married, quote, magazine cartoonist team whose sons love Dr. Seuss. So the pair decided to create their own series, based around a family of anthropomorphic bears. Bears, Berenstain, you get the connection. Now, as to why both 80s and 2000 kids have a strong association with these characters, quote, the first animated adaptation, an NBC Christmas special called The Berenstain Bears Christmas Tree, was produced in 1979. 4 other NBC seasonal specials followed in the early 1980s. From 1985 to 1986, 2 seasons of a Saturday morning Berenstain Bears cartoon aired on CBS, and in 2002, PBS created a season of a daily Berenstain Bears cartoon. Like Scooby-Doo and other properties, the Bears have circled around a couple of times, for a few generations and with some updates. Why are we telling you all of this? Well, for many of us, the Berenstain Bears are the beloved characters of our youth. That's Berenstain, Berenstain. Except that's not how the name is spelled or pronounced. It's Berenstain, Berenstain. Does that surprise you? You are not alone. Many people swear that somewhere along the line, the name actually changed. When? Well, that's up for debate. Some argue that they noticed around 2004, which would line up with the TV show's revival. Others pointed it out later when the Mandela Effect concept was popularized. But either way, it is a hot-button issue. In fact, as Screen Rant reported, some consider this to be more widespread than the original Mandela example. Quote, it's even been called the Berenstain Bear Effect or Berenstain Bears Effect. This Berenstain Mandela Effect phenomenon is so intense that full-blown debates have happened online, and some have even grown heated. And strangers, after perusing Reddit, we'd say that grown heated is putting it mildly. And we can understand the cause of possible confusion. Okay, maybe little kids just can't read cursive very well, and the logo has always been cursive, right? Perhaps a lot of us just misread it. Except, well, according to the Telegraph, there are a lot of old news clippings, TV listings, and even other media. We saw a Simpsons episode that still feature the Stein spelling. The Telegraph points out that it's commonly explained away as a typo. After all, the Stein spelling of any given surname is much more common than Stain, right? And according to the Telegraph, the Berenstain's son Mike says that he is personally confident that his own last name has always been spelled Stain, no matter what the internet might think. So maybe some of us, at least, just misremembered. Or we were misled by those typos in the TV guide. Gen Z, you can just Google that. But strangers, these are hardly the only examples. And you know what? Things just get weirder from here. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
علي الحماس مع منيو بيتزا هات ماي بوكس الجديد. 4 خيارات ماي بوكس تعدلها على كيفك وزيد عليها اختيارات ما لها حدود. اطلب ماي بوكس اليوم وخليها على ذوقك. بيتزا أو ملت كله بكيفك. وطلباتك الجانبية اختر 2 أو مشروب. خياراتك ما تنتهي. هي شروطك وأحكامك اللي ترضي ذوقك. منيو بيتزا هات ماي بوكس الجديد بشروطك وأحكامك. بيتزا هات اطلب اليوم.
And now it's time to discuss Shazam. Do you remember that one? A 90s kids movie starring the comedian Sinbad as a genie? The plot is basically that Sinbad is not good at granting wishes, and hilarity ensues. A family comes together, life lessons are learned, etc. We all saw it, right? Except, according to modern sources, we never did see it. There's no record of this movie existing. Check IMDb or Wikipedia, nada. And that is very confusing to a lot of people, including a man named Don. He spoke with the New Statesman and explained that he'd worked at his uncle's video store back in 1994. And he clearly remembers ordering 2 copies of the newly released Shazam for that business. I had to handle the 2 copies we owned dozens of times over the years, and I had to watch it multiple times to look for reported damages to the tape, rewind it and check it in, rent it out, and put boxes out on display for rental. Don remembered the plot too, as he said he'd watched the movie often because their customers reported issues with the tape, so he had to review it for those errors. He could practically describe it frame by frame. Another man named Carl, he told the Statesman that he owned the movie and that he'd watched it dozens of times with his sister. Now, as an adult, he's obsessed with finding a copy to prove that his memory is true. It feels like a part of my childhood has now been stolen from me. How does a movie simply vanish from our history? I've taken to Craigslist and have posted a bounty of $1,000 for anyone that can turn up a copy of this movie, whether it was accidentally kept from Blockbuster or if someone made their own bootleg VHS copy. I want to be able to make it known that the movie is indeed real. Unfortunately for Carl, that may be difficult, considering that Sinbad himself has tweeted that he never starred in such a film. Actually, back in 2017, his exact words on Twitter were, "Have you ever noticed that no one my age has seen this so-called Sinbad genie movie? Only you people who were kids in the 90s. The young mind." The Statesman spoke to plenty of others who clearly remembered the film. But of course, they couldn't really remember it, right? Because there was no such thing. So, why do they? According to MSN, Sinbad actually produced a spoof Shazam clip with the College Humor website for April Fool's Day 2017 to poke fun at the whole thing. Now, that could account for some of the stills that are floating around on the internet. But this whole Shazam Mandela discussion, it long predated that stunt. MSN also reported that another photo of Sinbad in what seemed to be a genie costume, one that someone dug up on eBay, it had come from a Sinbad the Sailor movie night. That's what Sinbad the comedian said anyway. Then there's another possible solution. There is a similarly titled movie, Kazam, that came out in 1996. According to IMDb, it was about a genie, and it was for kids. But it starred Shaquille O'Neal, who was a world-famous basketball player, over 7 feet tall, and perhaps not easily confused for the comedian Sinbad. Sinbad is tall, but he's nearly a foot shorter than Shaq, looks nothing like him, and, let us stress, has never played for the Lakers. Still, people argue that Shazam truthers have simply superimposed these two stars from the 90s and created some kind of mishmash. But Carl, who spoke with the New Statesman, you remember him? He says that is not the case. He explained, "I am one of several people who specifically never saw Kazam because it looked ridiculous to rip off Shazam just a few years after it had been released." However, some argue that people like Carl and Don might have simply filled Sinbad in because he was so omnipresent in the 1990s. He was in 7 movies that decade and starred in most of them, and he was featured in comedy specials. He even had his own TV show. Most of that work was family-friendly, so it was advertised everywhere. People who believe in what they remember strangers, they truly believe. It's not just bears in 90s movies either. Logos, from Ford to Coca-Cola to Volkswagen, they've come under question too. People swear that they've changed. How about Looney Tunes? Has it always been spelled Tunes, or was it once Toons? Is it double stuff Oreos, or is it double stuffed? There are at least a dozen examples floating around, from prayers to song lyrics, that have been declared a part of the Mandela Effect. Even Walt Disney has been hit. You know that famous line from their animated version of Snow White, when the queen gazes at her reflection and asks, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" Well, she doesn't say that. She says, "Magic mirror on the wall." Despite, according to IMDb, a 2012 live-action version where the queen does declare, "Mirror, mirror." It's all pretty weird, right? And then there's the Fruit of the Loom saga. Many of us are certain that logo, at one time at least, included a cornucopia, or a horn of plenty if you like. It's something that Fruit of the Loom vehemently denies. Fruit only, they claim, no horns, nothing to see. The public, though, they disagree. People have even brought proof, including possible patent applications and at least 4 photos to social media, specifically Reddit and TikTok. If you followed the Mandela Effect rabbit hole, you've probably seen this evidence. A few t-shirts that seem to have indisputably been printed with that cornucopia logo. But Snopes has done an absolutely exhaustive investigation into this, and they are ready to disprove our Horn of Plenty dreams. Here's what Snopes has found. As of March 2024, Snopes wrote that, quote, conclusively, 4 images frequently used in online forums and in emails to Snopes as evidence against our conclusions are provable forgeries. What's more, the site reports that, quote, Snopes searched archived newspaper advertisements from every decade, from the 1910s to the 2020s, and could not locate a single one with a cornucopia. Strangers, this is the level of archival research that we both applaud, and, to be honest, find frightening. As for the photo evidence and the logos that people have dug up, Snopes has answers for that too. Quote, the earliest example Snopes has identified was shared in 2017. The image received widespread exposure in a 2019 BuzzFeed quiz titled, You've seen these logos a million times, but I bet this Mandela Effect quiz still trips you up. In that case, the cornucopia logo image is used as the incorrect answer. And apparently, that second image was made by Fruit of the Loom itself for April Fool's Day. Per Snopes, quote, The bit was included in PR Daily's roundup of the best and worst brand pranks of April Fool's Day 2022. Then, Snopes went to a lot of trouble to show these designs had been taken and incorporated into pictures of t-shirts and such that had then been used as further proof online. The whole investigation is worth checking out. Very educational, and sources are on our website as always. But we have to admit this. This is one that we thought had been proven, with evidence, so this utter takedown by Snopes has us feeling pretty shaken. So, what is going on? All of us have misremembered something at one time or another, or we remember things very differently than other people do. Ask your siblings about a shared childhood experience if you'd like to have that argument in real time. And since public discussion of the Mandela Effect has become a thing, psychologists and other experts have been attempting to explain to us why we're recalling things from our recent past that simply don't seem to exist. Outside of typos and the Shaq Sinbad issue, what else could be causing this confusion? Per the conversation, there's a concept called the misinformation effect. Quote, where information you learn after an event can interfere with the way you recall it. So if someone else tells you about Nelson Mandela dying in prison, then you might remember it that way as well, even if you didn't have that particular memory in the first place. Then there's the reinterpretation of a similar event once you hear of a Mandela effect. For instance, the conversation points out that another anti-apartheid activist named Steve Biko died around the same time that many associate with Mandela's false death, and that, quote, his funeral was televised. The Richmond Times-Dispatch also discussed a few other related concepts, like confabulation and shared association. The first refers to creating a false memory, but obviously not on purpose. We do this to fill in gaps in what we're trying to recall. According to Forbes, quote, confabulation may look like an exaggeration of a real event, mismatching memories from one event into another, recalling a new memory, and thinking it took place at an earlier time, filling in missing informational gaps, or creating an entirely new memory that never occurred. So, if you see a photo of Sinbad that looks like it's from a movie about a genie, maybe you recall details from a genie movie, even if one didn't exist. Shared association, that is a little different. It relates to a common widespread belief, like the idea that Alexander Hamilton was a US president, which he was not, because of a shared association. Hamilton was a founding father, something that we associate with presidents. We assume that that musical did not help. So, it seems that we have pretty much proven that the Mandela Effect, while interesting, is more like the memory effect, right? Well, it seems like the correct conclusion. Except for one strange thing. There are those who've made an argument that our memories aren't actually playing tricks. Rather, it's time and space having one over on us. There are a few theories regarding the Mandela Effect and time. According to the New Statesman, those include that, quote, there has been some glitch in the world where there are parallel universes, or a timeline has been altered and such little things have got lost. But how would we end up with such a glitch, or a parallel universe, or how would we end up in an altered timeline? Well, there's this research center in Geneva, right? It's known as CERN, or European Organization for Nuclear Research. That's a Swiss acronym and the English translation. And some theorists, conspiracy ones, think that an experiment conducted about 16 years ago just might be the source of our issue. Per Forbes, quote, a popular theory is that CERN, the European Research Center, caused a splinter in time and space when it fired up the Large Hadron Collider in 2008 and started flinging atoms at other atoms to discover the roots of the universe. According to CERN's official website, the collider is, quote, the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. And what does that mean? Well, it was designed to help scientists study theories of particle physics, which scientists apparently enjoy doing. But, as CNN reported, some believe that when CERN did that, quote, they opened a portal to a different dimension. And maybe that could explain all the discrepancies, the slightly altered brand names, the tiny tears in the fabric of time that shifted us into a world where Shazam never existed and the Berenstain family had a slightly different last name. With that evidence at hand, what is the CERN Institute's take on this? Well, according to CNN, one of their scientists actually responded on TikTok, specifically on a video about the whole double stuff versus double stuffed Oreo controversy, and said, quote, there are much higher energy particle collisions happening in our atmosphere all the time. I can promise you that we are not going around changing the labels on your food. Still, we noticed that in that statement, she did not deny that they are ripping holes in time. Now, some think that it's not CERN ripping those holes, but an entirely different perpetrator. Time travelers. You know that whole idea of the butterfly effect, right? One tiny thing creates ripples. Every movie you've ever watched about the subject of time travel warns that any action in the past can affect the future, right? Well, maybe someone has been mucking about a little too much, and now we are dealing with their after effects. Of course, there's absolutely no way to prove any of this, as fun as it is to think about. And as passionately as many Redditors would argue against us that, yes, in fact, the proof is right there in front of us, please read this extremely long post for details. But as we've said many times before, we are not experts in much, and regrettably, our combined decade-plus of higher education did not cover parallel universes or quantum anything. But after looking over this evidence, we're not going to entirely rule any of it out either. After all, we have experienced the Mandela Effect ourselves, and while it seems most likely that the psychologists have offered up pretty good explanations for the phenomenon, perhaps there is something more to it all. Because, really, magic mirror on the wall, it just sounds wrong, doesn't it? And we swear we saw that cornucopia. And Sinbad, well, we can almost picture the cover of that VHS tape on the wall at Blockbuster, just waiting to be checked out on a Saturday night. But maybe it's just our imaginations. All of our imaginations, together, right now, dreaming of a past that could have been. We hope you'll join us next time for another real-life story from the fine print of America's local papers, from the lives of regular people, just like you and me, except for one strange thing. Strangers, we have launched a Substack to tell you more stories of the weird that are not quite long enough for the podcast. Most are paid, a few are free, but you need to be a subscriber to get them delivered right to your inbox. So, follow the link in our show notes to sign up for more content. It's like a newsletter, but a lot more fun. One Strange Thing is an independent podcast. To support the show and to hear more of the entirely true and enticingly peculiar, you now have 3 options to enjoy 2 extra bonus episodes a month. On Apple Premium and Supercast, you can get the bonus episodes delivered to your app of choice for just $2.99. And for $2 more a month on Patreon, you'll get more fun extras. There you'll get ad-free early releases of our regular episodes, the 2 full-length bonus episodes, monthly giveaways, blog posts, and occasional live streams, all for $5 a month. We hope you'll check out one of these options to support the show. There's a link in the show notes. If you enjoy One Strange Thing, please take a moment to leave us a great rating or review on your favorite podcast app. It truly helps.